When corporate heiress Madison Blackwell thinks she's signing a simple business merger document, she unknowingly seals her fate in an arranged marriage contract. But her mysterious husband's who-be Alexander Montgomery harbors deadly secrets that could destroy them both. What starts as a family arrangement spirals into a dangerous game of deception, betrayal, and forbidden love. Some stories make your heart race and your mind spin. This is one of them. Secrets, betrayal, and a love that could either conquer all or shatter completely. Where are you watching from? Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell for every shocking chapter. Let's begin. Madison Blackwell's pen hovered over the contract, the Mont Blanc's weight familiar in her manicured fingers. The law office smelled of leather and old money. Mahogany bookshelves stretching to coffered ceilings like silent witnesses to decades of deals that changed lives forever. Outside, Manhattan's February rain painted abstract patterns on bulletproof windows. Just a formality, sweetheart. Her father's voice carried that particular blend of authority and affection that had convinced her. To join Blackwell Industries straight out of Wharton? Standard merger paperwork. Your signature makes it official. She should have read it. Every instinct screamed at her to read every word, every clause, every footnote. But Robert Blackwell III stood behind her chair like a monument to success, and her mother's expectant smile burned into her peripheral vision. The Henderson acquisition had consumed her life for 3 months. This was supposed to be the victory lap. Madison signed her name with practiced efficiency, the ink flowing across cream-colored paper like blood across snow. Congratulations, Miss Blackwell. The lawyer's smile looked carved from stone. You're now legally bound to Mr. Alexander Montgomery in matrimony, effective immediately upon his signature. The words hit her like ice water in her veins. What did you just say? Her father's hand found her shoulder, heavy as a judge's gavel. Madison, there's something we need to discuss. She spun in the leather chair, the contract clutched in trembling fingers. The words swam before her eyes. Marriage agreement, binding union, 7-year term. Her carefully controlled world tilted sideways. You tricked me. The accusation escaped as barely a whisper. This isn't a merger. It's a marriage contract. Victoria Blackwell glided forward, all silk and subtle perfume. Darling, we did what was necessary. The Montgomery alliance will secure both our futures. Alexander is a wonderful young man. Alexander. Madison's voice cracked like breaking glass. I don't even know an Alexander Montgomery. The mahogany door opened with surgical precision. A man stepped inside, tall and lean with storm-gray eyes that seemed to catalog every detail in microseconds. His charcoal suit was perfectly tailored, but Madison caught the slight bulge beneath his left arm. Military bearing, dangerous grace. Everything about him screamed predator wearing civilization like camouflage. You must be Madison. His voice held traces of an accent she couldn't place. British boarding school polished over something rougher. I'm Alexander Montgomery, your husband. She stood so fast the chair rolled backward. This is insane. I'm not married to anyone. I didn't consent to this. Alexander's smile was sharp enough to cut diamonds. Actually, you did, 10 seconds ago. Your signature's quite lovely, by the way. The contract trembled in her hands as she read the terms that would chain her life to this, strangers. 7 years, no divorce without mutual consent. Shared assets, shared responsibilities, shared everything. Why? The question escaped like a plea. Why would you do this to me? Her father's expression softened for just a moment, revealing something that might have been regret. Because the alternative is losing everything, Madison. Blackwell Industries, our home, our family legacy. The Montgomery alliance is the only thing standing between us and complete financial ruin. Alexander moved closer, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne over something metallic. Something that reminded her of her grandfather's war medals hidden in their tarnished box. I know this is overwhelming, he said quietly, but we're both in this situation now. We can make it work. Madison looked into his eyes and saw something that made her breath catch, pain deep. Carefully hidden pain that matched the hollow ache growing in her chest. And if I refuse to honor this contract? The lawyer cleared his throat diplomatically. The financial penalties would be substantial, for both families. Alexander stepped closer, close enough that she could see the small scar bisecting his left eyebrow. Madison, I give you my word. I'll do everything in my power to make this bearable for both of us. She studied his face, searching for deception, for cruelty, for anything that would help her understand how her life had become a chess game where she was both player and pawn. What aren't you telling me? She asked softly. For just a moment, his composure cracked. She saw something flicker behind those gray eyes. Fear, desperation, secrets that ran deeper than family business. More than you could possibly imagine, he whispered. The admission hung between them like a loaded gun. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. Alexander glanced at the screen and his face went dead white. We need to leave now. What's wrong? Madison felt ice forming in her stomach. Alexander was already moving toward the door, his hand instinctively moving toward that bulge beneath his jacket.
They found me.
The black SUV's engine roared to life as Alexander gunned it through Manhattan traffic like a man fleeing hell itself. Madison gripped the leather seat, her wedding contract still crumpled in her free hand, watching her life disappear in the side mirror. Who found you? She demanded, her voice fighting to stay steady over the screaming sirens growing louder behind them. Alexander's knuckles were white against the steering wheel. People who want me dead. He took a corner so sharp, Madison's shoulders slammed into the door. Behind them, two motorcycles weaved through traffic with predatory precision, the riders dressed in black leather and wearing helmets that reflected the city lights like insect eyes. That's not an answer. Madison's corporate training kicked in. The same steel that had closed $1 Million. No. Steel's now keeping her voice level while her world exploded around her. I just signed my life away to you. I deserve to know why people are shooting at us. A bullet spiderwebbed the rear window. Alexander cursed in what sounded like Russian and yanked the wheel hard left, tires screaming against asphalt. My real name isn't Montgomery, it's Volkov. Alexander Volkov. The surname hit Madison like a physical blow. She'd read that name. In classified briefings, her father thought she didn't see. Volkov. Russian oligarchy. Arms dealing. The National Criminal Syndicate. You're telling me I'm married into the Russian mafia? Former Russian mafia? Alexander's smile was bitter as black coffee. I've been in witness protection for 3 years. The marriage was supposed to be my new identity's final layer. Respectable American businessman with a respectable American wife. Another bullet punched through the SUV's rear panel. Madison heard the engine cough, then catch again. Supposed to be. Alexander's eyes found hers in the rearview mirror. Someone leaked my location. Someone who knew about our arrangement. The implications crashed over her like freezing water. In my family or mine? His voice carried the weight of betrayal that went bone deep. The only people who knew the truth were the ones who arranged this marriage. Madison's mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Her father's recent financial troubles, her mother's sudden enthusiasm for this arrangement. The lawyer's stone-carved smile. How many people have you killed? The question escaped before she could stop it. Alexander's laugh was sharp enough to draw blood. More than I can. Count fewer than I should have. He spun the wheel again, and they careened into an underground parking garage. The SUV's headlights swept across concrete pillars like searchlights in a war zone. Alexander killed the engine and the lights, plunging them into darkness thick enough to taste. Why did you leave? Madison whispered. In the darkness, she could feel him turning to look at her, 'cause I discovered my father was selling weapons to terrorists. When I tried to stop him, he put a price on my head. Your own father wants you dead. Family loyalty is a luxury I can't afford. His voice carried 3 years of practiced numbness. The FBI offered me a new life in exchange for everything I knew about the Volkov organization. Madison felt pieces clicking together with sickening clarity. That's why you needed the marriage. Wife, a normal life, something to make Alexander Montgomery real. And you needed the Montgomery money to save Blackwell Industries. Alexander's silhouette moved in the darkness. We were both bought and sold, Madison. The only question is by whom. Footsteps echoed through the parking garage. Slow, deliberate, Hunting. Alexander's hand found hers in the darkness, and she felt calluses that spoke of triggers pulled and lives taken. I need you to understand something. If they find us, they won't just kill me. They'll kill anyone connected to me, including your wife, especially my wife. The footsteps were getting closer. Madison could hear voices speaking rapid Russian, could smell gun oil and cigarette smoke drifting through the concrete maze. There's something else, Alexander whispered. Something I haven't told you. Madison's blood turned to ice water. What? The contract you signed? It wasn't just a marriage agreement. What do you mean? Alexander's grip on her hand tightened. Look at Clause 17, subsection C. Madison fumbled for her phone's flashlight, the small beam illuminating the crumpled paper. Her eyes found the clause, and the words blurred as her brain struggled to process their meaning. In the event of the husband's death, she read aloud, her voice barely a whisper, all assets, debts, and legal obligations transfer to the surviving spouse. Madison. Alexander's voice was gentle as a knife between ribs. I didn't just marry you for cover. I married you because I'm dying. The parking garage went silent except for the sound of her heart breaking. How long? She whispered. 6 months? Maybe less? The footsteps stopped directly above them. There's a service tunnel behind that maintenance door. Alexander breathed against her ear. When I say run, you go. Don't stop. Don't look back. I'm not leaving you, Madison.
Nice.
His voice carried the finality of a judge's sentence. You don't understand. The debts I'm passing to you aren't just money. They're blood debts. Vengeance debts. It's the kind that follow families for generations. A spotlight blazed to life above them, turning the parking garage into a stage where death was the only performance. Run, Alexander whispered. But Madison was already moving, not toward the tunnel, but toward the glove compartment where she'd glimpsed the outline of a gun. I said run, not fight. Madison's fingers closed around cold steel. I'm not just a trust fund princess, Alexander. I'm a Blackwell, and Blackwells don't run from a fight. The first shot shattered the SUV's windshield, and Madison discovered exactly how much she was willing to sacrifice for a man she'd known for less than an hour. The safe house smelled like stale cigarettes and broken dreams, hidden 3 floors beneath a queen's funeral home that asked no questions and answered fewer. Madison pressed a bag of frozen peas against Alexander's shoulder where a bullet had, kissed close enough to tear his shirt and draw blood. You saved my life, he said quietly, watching her hands work with surprising steadiness. I saved both our lives. Madison's voice carried a hardness that surprised them both. Turns out, for years of trap shooting at the country club actually prepared me for something useful. They'd fought their way out of that parking garage like wolves cornered by hunters, moving with instincts neither knew they possessed. Madison had put 2 bullets center mass into a man who'd been trying to kill her husband. The word husband still felt foreign in her mouth, like speaking a language she'd never learned. Alexander's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his face went arctic. What is it? A message from my father. Alexander's voice could have frozen blood. He knows about you. He knows your name, your family, where you went to school, your favorite coffee shop. Madison felt ice crystallize in her veins. How is that possible? I didn't even know I was married until 2 hours ago because someone told him. Alexander stood, moving to the window like a predator testing cage bars. Someone who knew about our arrangement before we did. The pieces were falling into place with sickening precision. Madison pulled out her phone and scrolled through her recent calls until she found what she was looking for. A number she'd never seen before, logged 20 minutes before they'd arrived at the lawyer's office. Alexander. Her voice was steady. As a scalpel? What's your father's phone number? He rattled off digits that matched the unknown number exactly. He called me, Madison whispered. Dmitry Volkov called me this morning, and I answered. The silence stretched between them like a tightrope over an abyss. What did he say? Madison closed her eyes, forcing herself to remember. Nothing. Said hello? There was silence. Then he hung up. I figured it was a wrong number. He was confirming your voice, making sure you were real. Alexander's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. Someone gave him your number, Madison. Someone who wanted him to know exactly who his son was marrying. Madison's phone rang. Her father's name appeared on the screen like an accusation. "Answer it," Alexander said. "But put it on speaker." Robert Blackwell's voice filled the room. With false cheerfulness. "Madison, sweetheart, how are you adjusting to married life?" "Dad." Madison's voice was steady as granite. "How long have you known about the Volkov family?" The pause stretched long enough to hang a man. "I'm not sure what you mean, dear." "How long have you been working with Dmitry Volkov?" Another pause. When Robert spoke again, his voice had shed all pretense of paternal warmth. "Long enough to know that your marriage serves multiple purposes. The Montgomery money wasn't just about saving Blackwell Industries, Madison. It was about paying off debts you didn't know we had." Alexander's hand found the gun at his hip. "What kind of debts? The kind that accumulate when you launder money?" For Russian oligarchs for 15 years, Robert's confession fell like stones into still water. The kind that require collateral when the market turns and your investments disappear. Madison felt the world tilt sideways. "Collateral, you sweetheart. You've always been the collateral." The words hit like physical blows. Madison understood with crystal clarity that she'd never been a daughter. She'd been an asset. Bargaining. Chip in a game played by men who measured worth in dollars and lives. "The marriage contract," she whispered. "If Alexander dies, I inherit his debts to your family business. But those debts aren't just money." "Very good." Robert's voice carried the approval of a teacher whose star pupil had finally grasped. "Difficult concept. Alexander's death would make you legally responsible for his father's vendetta. Dmitry gets his revenge on his son and his revenge on me. Everyone's debts get paid." Alexander was already moving, checking weapons, preparing for war. "How long do we have?" "They're already on their way." Robert's voice held something that might have been regret. "I'm sorry, Madison. I truly am. But this was always how it was." Going to end, the line went dead. Madison stared at her phone like it might spontaneously combust. Her father. Her own father had sold her to the Russian mafia as payment for debts and revenge. "We need to move," Alexander said. "Now." But Madison wasn't moving. She was thinking, processing, planning with the same cold precision that had made her one of the youngest VPs in Blackwell Industries history. "No." Her voice cut through the panic like a blade through silk. "We're not running anymore. Madison, these people will kill us both without blinking." She turned to face him, and Alexander saw something in her eyes that made him take a step back. Something that looked like her father's ruthlessness tempered by her own particular brand of fury. "Then we kill them first. You don't understand what you're saying." Madison smiled, and it was sharp enough to draw blood. "I understand. Perfectly. My father sold me. Your father wants you dead. Both our families betrayed us." She pulled out her phone and began scrolling through contacts. They made one critical mistake. "What's that?" "They underestimated what a Blackwell is capable of when you take away everything she has to lose." Alexander watched her dial a number he didn't recognize. "Who are you calling?" "My grandmother." Madison's smile turned predatory. "Rose Blackwell. It's the woman who taught me that sometimes the only way to survive a war is to win it." The phone rang twice before a voice like aged whiskey answered. "Madison, sweetheart, I was wondering when you'd call." Grandma rose. Madison's voice was steady as stone. "I need you to open the safe." Silence. "Which safe, dear?" "The one behind grandfather's war medals. The one you told me never to tell." "Anyone about?" Another pause, then a sound that might have been laughter. "I always knew this day would come," Rose said. "How many are we expecting?" Madison looked at Alexander, seeing not just a dying man with dangerous secrets, but a partner. An ally. Someone who understood that sometimes survival required becoming the thing everyone feared. "All of them," Madison said. "Good." Rose's voice carried 3 generations of Blackwell steel. "It's time they remembered what happens when you threaten our family." Rose Blackwell's house looked like every other Connecticut estate from the outside. All ivy-covered walls and proper New England charm. Inside, however, the basement had been converted into something that would have made military contractors weep with envy.
Thank Jesus Christ.
Alexander breathed, staring at enough firepower to level a city block. Duh. Rose emerged from behind a rack of assault rifles like a silver-haired fairy godmother armed for Armageddon. Language, dear, and it's not Jesus you should be praying to. It's your grandfather's ghost. May he rest in peace. Madison ran her fingers along the barrel of a sniper rifle with practiced familiarity. How long have you been planning for this? 60 years, Rose said matter-of-factly. Ever since your grandfather came home from Korea with stories about what real monsters look like when they wear human faces. Alexander found his voice. You knew. About the Volkov connection. About my father, about all of it. Rose's laugh could have cut diamonds. Sweetheart, I've been tracking your family's business interests since before you were born. The Blackwells didn't survive 3 generations by being naive about who we were dealing with. Madison looked up from checking the action on a pistol. That looked like it could stop a charging rhino. Why didn't you warn me? Because you needed to choose. Rose's expression gentled slightly. I could have prevented this marriage, could have warned you about the contract, could have saved you from all of this. But then you never would have become who you're supposed to be. And who is that? Rose smiled. And for the first time, Madison saw her own steel reflected in her grandmother's eyes. A Blackwell who's ready to take control of the family business. The real family business. Alexander was putting pieces together with the speed of a man who'd survived 3 years in witness. Protection. You're not just old money, you're shadow money. Black market, arms dealing, among other things. Rose handed Madison a vest that looked like it could stop a tank shell. The legitimate businesses are nice for taxes, but the real money has always come from serving people who need things the government pretends don't exist. Madison felt the last of her naive world crumbling away like sand castles at high tide. How many people know? Your father thinks he's been running the business for 20 years. Rose's voice carried maternal affection mixed with professional disappointment. This poor boy never realized he was just the public face, while I handled the actual operations. That's why you were never worried about the debt to the Volkovs, Alexander said. Because you've been planning to eliminate them. Rose's expression went arctic. Dmitry Volkov made the mistake of threatening my granddaughter. Insult requires a very specific type of response. Madison's phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. She showed it to Alexander and Rose. We have your husband. Come to the old pier at midnight. Come alone or he dies.
Alexander frowned.
I'm standing right here. Rose checked her watch. They're early and not very bright. She gestured to a bank of monitors that Madison was just now noticing. They've got someone they think is you, dear boy. The screens showed thermal images of the pier, complete with armed figures positioned around what looked like a bound prisoner. Even in the grainy footage, Madison could see the captive was too tall, too broad to be Alexander. Who did they take? Madison asked. Rose's expression darkened. Your father. And the silence that followed was profound enough to hear heartbeats. They think Robert is Alexander? Madison felt puzzle pieces clicking together in her mind. But why would they make that mistake? Alexander was studying the monitors with professional intensity, because someone told them he was. Someone who wanted Dmitry to take the wrong target. Madison turned to her grandmother with growing suspicion. Grandma! What did you do? Rose's smile was sharp enough to perform surgery. I may have made a phone call this afternoon. Suggested that Alexander Montgomery was actually Robert Blackwell in deep cover. Fed them just enough real intelligence to make the lie believable. You used my father as bait. You used your father as exactly what he is. A liability who's outlived his usefulness. Rose's voice carried the finality of a judge passing sentence. Robert made deals with the Volkovs without consulting me. Put you at risk. He sold you like property. Her eyes hardened to flint. That requires consequences. Alexander was still studying the thermal imaging. How many shooters? 12 visible. It's probably 6 more positioned as backup. Rose moved to another bank of equipment that looked like mission control for a small war. Standard kidnapping formation. They're expecting one frightened girl to stumble into their trap. Madison felt something cold and sharp, crystallizing in her chest. What are they getting instead? Rose's smile could have frozen hell. 3 generations of Blackwell women who've had enough of being underestimated. Alexander looked between Madison and Rose with growing understanding. This isn't a rescue mission. This is an execution. Dmitry Volkov has spent 3 years hunting you, Rose said matter-of-factly. He's killed 17 people trying to find you. He's threatened my granddaughter. He's disrupted businesses that have operated smoothly for 6 decades. She chambered around with practiced efficiency. Tonight his hunting days end. Madison found herself holding a weapon that felt as natural in her hands as a Mont-Blanc pen. What about my father? Rose's expression softened, just slightly. Sweetheart, your father has been stealing from the family accounts for 2 years. The debts to the Volkovs weren't from bad investments. They were from Robert's gambling addiction and some very poor choices about which funds to borrow from. The betrayal cut deeper than Madison had thought possible. He stole from us to pay his gambling debts, then sold me to cover the theft. Robert stopped being family the moment he put you at risk, Rose said quietly. What happens to him tonight is justice, not murder. Alexander checked his watch. 11:30. If we're doing this, we need to move. Madison looked at her husband, really looked at him. Dying man, former killer, someone who'd given up everything to stop his father's evil. Someone who'd married a stranger to gain a few months of normal life before the cancer took him. Alexander? Her voice was steady as bedrock. After tonight, after we end this, what happens to us? His smile was gentle as falling snow. I die, Madison. It's probably within a month. Cancer is aggressive, and I've been off treatment for weeks. And if I said I wanted to spend that month with you, really with you? Something shifted in Alexander's expression, something that looked like hope, trying not to get itself killed. I'd say you're crazy. I'd say you barely know me. I'd say I'm a dying man with more blood on his hands than you could ever imagine. Madison stepped closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in his gray eyes. And then what would you say? Alexander's voice dropped to a whisper. I'd say that meeting you was worth everything that came before. Rose cleared her throat diplomatically. This is very touching, children, but we have a war to fight. Madison turned to her grandmother, seeing clearly for the first time the woman who'd shaped her life from the shadows. After tonight, the business becomes mine, if you want it. If you're strong enough to handle what it really means to be a Blackwell. Madison thought about her father's betrayal, about Alexander's sacrifice, about the choice between running from the truth and embracing it completely. I want it, she said. All of it. Rose's smile was proud as sunlight. Then let's go teach the Volkovs what happens when they threaten our family. As they moved toward the door, weapons gleaming like surgical instruments in the darkness, Madison felt the last traces of the naive girl she'd been that morning disappear forever. She'd signed a marriage contract without reading it. Now she was about to write her father's death warrant in blood and fire. Some signatures, she realized, were written with more than ink. The pier stretched into the Hudson like a finger pointing at eternity, fog rolling off the black water thick enough to taste. Madison counted muzzle flashes in the darkness. 12, just as Rose had predicted. Her grandmother's intelligence network was apparently as precise as her aim. Robert Blackwell knelt on the weathered planks, hands zip-tied behind his back, a bruise blooming across his left cheek like a poisonous flower. Even in the dim light, Madison could see him scanning the shadows. For a rescue that would never come, Dmitry Volkov emerged from behind a shipping container like death, wearing an expensive suit. 70 years old, but moving with the fluid grace of a man who'd spent decades turning violence into art. His silver hair caught moonlight like spun metal. Alexander Montgomery, Dmitry called into the fog. Or should I say, my dear traitorous son, you've led me quite a chase. Madison stepped into the light, weapon steady in her hands. Wrong son, Dmitry. Dmitry's expression shifted from triumph to confusion to something approaching respect. Madison Blackwell. Now ... Unexpected. Where's Alexander? Madison kept her voice level, professional. The same tone she'd used to close million-dollar deals now applied to negotiations where lives hung in the balance. Safe, Dmitry said, though his eyes were scanning the shadows. For now, though I confess, I'm curious why you came instead of your husband. Because my husband is dying. Madison stepped closer, close enough to see the surprise flicker across. Dmitry's features. Cancer. 6 months, maybe less. Your vendetta is against a man who's already been sentenced to death. Dimitri's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. How poetic. Though it doesn't change what he owes me. What does he owe you? Exactly, Madison gestured toward her father. Robert here tells me it's money. But we both know this isn't about money. Your father is a fool, Dimitri said dismissively. This has never been about his pathetic debts or his gambling addiction. This is about my son's betrayal.
Alexander.
Destroyed my organization, cost me billions, sent dozens of my people to prison. Some debts can only be paid in blood. Madison nodded as if this made perfect sense. Blood for blood. It's an old law. I respect that. From the shadows, she heard the whisper of movement. Rose and Alexander, positioning themselves like chess pieces for a game 3 generations in the making. But there's something you should know, Madison continued. Alexander isn't your son anymore. He's mine. Dimitri's eyes narrowed. Marriage doesn't change blood, little girl. No, Madison agreed, but it changes loyalty. And loyalty is stronger than blood. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Dimitri studied her with the intensity of a man reading tea leaves that might predict his own death. You're stalling, he said finally. I'm negotiating. Madison's smile could have cut steel. See, you made a critical error, Dimitri. You assumed this was your game, played by your rules. And whose game is it? Mine. The word cracked across the pier like a gunshot. In the silence that followed, Madison heard the soft click of safeties being released from a dozen different positions. You see, Madison continued conversationally, my grandmother has been very patient with your family's business for 60 years. You've been useful, profitable, well-behaved, but tonight you made the mistake of threatening me directly. Dimitri's confidence flickered like a candle in wind. Rose Blackwell is a relic. An old woman playing at games she no longer understands. Rose Blackwell, came a voice from the darkness. Is the woman who's been letting you think you were in? Charge. Rose stepped into the light, moving with the predatory grace of someone who'd learned to kill before Madison was born. Behind her, thermal scopes painted red dots across Dimitri's men like deadly Christmas lights. Lo, Dimitri, Rose said pleasantly. You're trespassing. The old Russian's composure cracked like ice under pressure. This is impossible. My intelligence said you were retired. I'd let you believe that because it was profitable, Rose replied. You've outlived your usefulness. Worse, you've threatened my granddaughter. That requires correction. Alexander materialized from the fog like a ghost made flesh, weapon trained on his father's heart. Hello, Papa. Dimitri's face cycled through surprise, rage, and something that might have been pride, my son. Finally, you show yourself. I'm not your son, Alexander said quietly. I haven't been for 3 years. Blood doesn't change, boy. No, Alexander agreed. But choice does. Madison watched the tableau unfold. With the cold precision of someone calculating profit margins, her father kneeling in defeat, her husband facing down the man who'd shaped him into a killer. Her grandmother orchestrating death like a conductor leading a symphony. The way I see it, Madison said, drawing everyone's attention back to her. We have several options, Dimitri laughed, a sound like breaking bone. You think you're in a position to negotiate? I think I'm in a position to choose how many of your men go home tonight. Madison gestured to the red dots dancing across the faces of Dimitri's soldiers. Rose has 43 shooters positioned around this pier. You have 18 counting. Yourself and the men holding my father. The silence stretched tight as piano wire. 43, Dimitri repeated slowly. The Blackwell network is extensive, Rose said conversationally. 60 years of careful recruitment. Military veterans, police snipers, intelligence operatives who've grown tired of government paychecks. Madison continued as if discussing quarterly earnings. Option 1. You and your men leave. Tonight. Forever. You stop hunting, Alexander, you. Write off Robert's debts, and you never set foot on American soil again. And in exchange, you get to live. Dimitri's smile was sharp as a knife blade. And option 2, we kill all of you and divide your territory among more reasonable partners. weight of the threat settled over the pier like fog. Madison watched Dimitri's eyes, saw the moment he realized this wasn't a bluff or a desperate gambit.
I got mad.
This was a business transaction, coldly calculated and methodically planned. "You're not what I expected," Dimitri said finally. "I'm exactly what my family needed me to become." Madison looked at her father, still kneeling in the shadows. "Robert made the mistake of thinking he could trade me like property. You made the mistake of accepting that trade. And what happens to your father?" Madison's expression didn't change. "Robert ceased being my father when he sold me to pay his gambling debts. What happens to him now is justice." Robert's voice cracked across the pier like a whip. "Madison, please. I'm your father. I raised you. I loved you. I gave you everything." "You gave me nothing," Madison replied, her voice steady as granite. "Rose gave me everything. The education, the training, the strength to survive what you tried to do to me." She turned back to Dimitri. "Choose. Option 1 or option 2? Dimitri studied her for a long moment, then looked at Alexander. "You love her?" It wasn't a question. "Yes," Alexander said simply. "Enough to die for her?" "I'm already dying," Alexander replied. "The question is whether I'll die as your son or as her husband." Dimitri nodded slowly, as if this settled something in his mind. "And you, Madison Blackwell, do you love him?" Madison felt the weight of the question, understood that her answer would determine how this night ended. She thought about the man who'd married her to give himself a few months of normal life. The man who'd chosen her safety over his own survival. The man who'd shown her what loyalty looked like when it was freely given instead of sold. "Yes, she said I love him." Dimitri smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. "Then perhaps my son chose well after all." The old Russian stepped back, hands visible and empty. "Option 1, he said clearly. "We leave tonight. Forever." Madison nodded. "Your men first. Weapons on the ground?" One by one, Dimitri's soldiers placed their weapons on the pier and melted back into the fog. Within minutes, only Dimitri remained, standing alone in the circle of light. "One last thing," Madison said. "My father?" Dimitri glanced at Robert, still kneeling in defeat. "What about him?" "He stays here." Robert's voice cracked like breaking glass. "Madison, no. I'm your father, please." Madison looked at the man who'd raised her, who'd taught her to read balance sheets and close deals and never show weakness. The man who'd sold her to save himself. "You stopped being my father the moment you signed that contract," she said quietly. "Rose is my family now. Alexander is my family now. You're just a liability that needs to be resolved." Dimitri nodded with professional respect. "You would have made an excellent addition to my organization, Madison Blackwell." "I already have an organization," Madison replied, "and it's going to outlast yours." Dimitri inclined his head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement from one predator to another. Then he walked into the fog and disappeared like smoke on water. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of water. Lapping against the pier and Robert's quiet sobbing, Rose approached her granddaughter, weapon lowered, but not holstered. "What would you like me to do with him?" Madison looked at her father one last time, saw not the powerful businessman who dominated her childhood, but a broken man who'd gambled away everything that mattered for the temporary thrill of cards and dice. "Give him a boat," she said finally. "Food for 3 days. Let him choose his own ending." Rose nodded approvingly. "Merciful. Your grandfather would be proud." Alexander moved to Madison's side, close enough that she could feel his warmth in the cold night air. "Are you all right?" Madison considered the question. Was she all right? She'd discovered her marriage was a business transaction. Her father was a criminal. Her grandmother was an arms dealer, and her husband was dying of cancer. She'd killed 2 men, orchestrated her father's exile, and inherited a criminal empire. "No," she said honestly, "but I will be." They watched as Rose's men escorted Robert to a small fishing boat at the end of the pier, climbed aboard without. Looking back, understanding perhaps that some bridges burned completely and left no way home. "How long do we have?" Madison asked, as the boat disappeared into the darkness. Maybe 6 weeks, Alexander said. The doctors weren't optimistic. Then, we better make them count. Alexander turned to face her, and in the moonlight, she could see the boy he might have been if violence hadn't claimed him so young. What do you want to do with 6 weeks? Madison smiled, and for the first time in hours, it was genuine. Everything. About the business, about you, about who I'm supposed to become. She took his hand, felt the calluses and scars that told the story of his life, and I want to love you. Really love you. Not because of a contract or an arrangement, but because you chose me over your own survival. I'd choose you again, Alexander said quietly. Every time. Madison kissed him then, there on the pier where she'd become someone new, someone harder. Someone who understood that love and violence were often the same currency, just spent in different ways. When they broke apart, Rose was watching them with maternal satisfaction, ready to go home. Father had disappeared then at the pier where she'd claimed her inheritance in blood and choices. Tomorrow, she would begin learning how to run an empire built in shadows. Tomorrow, she would start the process of loving a dying man with all the time they had left. Tonight, she was exactly who she was supposed to be.
Yes.
Madison said, "Let's go home." 6 weeks later, Alexander Volkov died peacefully in his sleep, holding his wife's hand as morning light painted their bedroom gold. Madison Blackwell buried him in the family plot beside her grandfather, under a headstone that read, "Simply, beloved husband, he chose love." That afternoon, she walked into the boardroom of Blackwell Industries, wearing widow's black and her grandmother's smile. The legitimate business would continue as it always had, but the real work, the shadow work, would be guided by steady hands, and a heart that had learned the difference between being sold and choosing to belong. She'd signed a marriage contract without reading it. In the end, it had given her everything she'd never known she wanted. The end.